one thing that you need to know about yourself is, are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Are you a tactile learner? If you don't know what type of learner you are, it's going to be very detrimental because you're not going to be able to know how to study. Welcome back to my channel. If you haven't seen any of my videos before, my name is Natalie, but I do go by Naty. I am a family nurse practitioner, and basically the goal of my channel is to help pre-nursing, nursing, as well as FNP students get through school as easily as possible. I give advice as well as talk about my personal experiences throughout school. I also take a look and review at resumes, personal statements. So if you need any of that done, please take a look at the description box down below, and it tells you the whole process of how that goes. So for this video, I thought I'd discuss how I studied in nursing school. I've already made a few videos on FNP students, but I don't want to neglect the nursing students. So I thought I'd talk about how I personally studied in nursing school. So for me, I am a visual and I am a tactile learner. So I learn through reading and I learn through actually writing something out. As far as an auditory learner, that is a big no for me. I hear something and then I forget it 5 seconds later. So I know that whatever I need to do, if someone is giving a lecture, whatever they're saying, I need to write it down or type it out because I need to be able to visually see it. I will not remember the conversation. I will not remember the lecture. So that is first things first. So this video is definitely how I study, so it also applies to people that are a visual and or a tactile learner. So first thing what I did, every single time that I went to class, I would download the PDF or the PowerPoint of whatever they were going to be discussing that day. Depending on the format, if you have a PDF format, you can also click on text and just write any additional notes per slide, or of course on a PowerPoint format, you can go ahead and write notes down below. So every time that I went to class, I personally did not worry about learning the information throughout class because again, I am not an auditory learner. So every time I went to class, I wrote down every single thing that I could, which is why I typed it out because I am a very quick typer and not a quick writer. So my goal throughout each session was to make sure I had all my notes and had everything that was said written down so that I can refer back to it later. So once I had all of the notes and I had everything that I needed for every test, I would go ahead and look over all of the notes. So let's say for one class, you have 4 different topics that are going to be on that test. What I usually did was I tried to study all of the topics all at once every single day. And I had a friend tell me, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "That's just always the way that I had done it." And she said, "Well, I look at one topic per day and make sure I really get that topic before going on to the next." And I had never had anybody tell me that before. And as soon as she told me that, I started adapting her way of studying. And it was just so much easier, so much less anxiety because you're working on one thing at a time. It's not so overwhelming as trying to look at everything all of the time. So when I studied, they tell you in your syllabi when your tests are and all of that. So you know how much time you need to study. Obviously, if you're in nursing school, I hope you would know that if you're trying to study the day before and do well on the test, it's more likely not going to happen. So I usually gave myself a week to a week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on how tough the subjects were for me personally, to give myself time to study. So I would study coming home from school, sometimes on Sundays, but I would at least study 5 hours a day if I could. So I would look at one topic at a time. I would read all of the topics and I would make additional notes. So if there are words that I didn't understand or terms I didn't understand, while I was studying my first go around, I would go ahead and write a definition of this means this, whatever. So that when I went back to review it a second time, I understood every single thing that I was reading. And even if I didn't, I had a little note of defining whatever that was. That was very helpful to me. And it was also helpful because I was learning at the same time. Because if you're reading all of this information and there are a lot of words you don't know, or there's acronyms that you don't know, then you're studying just words, you're not understanding information and content. So if there's something you don't know, go ahead and make a little note of what it is. If there's an acronym you don't know, go ahead and look it up. Usually all the time, if there was an acronym I didn't know, I wrote down the acronym on Google and said medical abbreviation, and it said what it was. So the first go around was just making sure that I understood the information, that I had, that I knew what everything was, because if you're studying something you don't know or that's not defined, what good is it? That was the first go around for each topic that I did. And then I would go ahead and study all of my notes. So one day would be one topic, another day would be another topic, and so on and so forth. So the last couple of days before my exam, I studied 2 topics at a time, because at that point you probably know very well each individual topic and you don't need a full day to study. So once you're studying more topics in a day towards the end before your exam, that's when you would know, then you should know more about each topic, because you're going quicker through the information. You're not having to sit there and really understand each part of your topic because you already know. So every time that I would study, I would read a passage. If I understood it and I can explain it to somebody and it was just, okay, yeah, I know that, I would move on to the next thing. If there is something that maybe is a little bit more tricky to understand, or there are a lot of parts to it or whatever, then I would always have a notebook and pen with me and I would write it out a couple of times until it stuck, because that was a good way for me to write out the information. It was another form of learning and it helped me grasp the concept a little bit better. So I read something, I didn't really know it, wrote it down, then I was able to kind of rationale it. If you can't, rationalize it in your head, try rationalizing out, writing it out, and that helped me quite a lot. So that when I wrote it out, the next time that I reviewed everything, I was like, oh yeah, now I understand it. So that's something that I would recommend doing. It was very, very helpful for me, and that's what I did for every single exam. So each day reviewed one topic and did all of my notes. So it's kind of like you're making another study guide. And then if you do have a study guide provided, I didn't really fill out a study guide per se. So like, let's say you get a study guide, what I would do is, let's say it's study guide, there's a topic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. I would write number 1 on the PowerPoint of whatever talked about that particular part of the study guide. I didn't make a study guide. To me, it was a waste of time because I already had the information. So I would rather say, okay, I go through these different slides. The slide's important, but this slide is more important because it's something that was on the study guide, if that makes any sense. If you need any more clarification, please ask a question or email me. But to me, to make a whole other study guide from the information that I already had in my brain didn't make sense. And it wasn't a good way for me to learn either, because if I were going to do a study guide, I'd have to write it out for me to think that it was worth my time instead of typing it out, because you don't really learn when you type, you learn more when you write. So I just opted out of creating a study guide. So that's kind of what I did. So going through all of that, it really helped me kind of rationalize things in different topics, not making it super overwhelming, because there are going to be a lot of different topics that you study. There are going to be a lot of topics on one particular exam, and it can be very overwhelming. It's a lot of content, heavy information. Not that it's so mind-blowing difficult, but because there's so much of it at one time, it can be very overwhelming. And especially if you're in the ABSN or accelerated BSN program, it can be extremely overwhelming because it's quick and there's a lot more information at once. So just keep that in mind. Find your way of studying. What I recommend is when you go into nursing school, your first test is kind of like your trial run to see how you answer questions, how you study. If you studied one particular way and it did not result into a great grade, try to switch up your study habits, talk to other students and see how they study. One thing that you need to know about yourself is, are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Are you a tactile learner? If you don't know what type of learner you are, it's going to be very detrimental because you're not going to be able to know how to study. So first things first, figure out what type of learner you are. Be consistent with that whenever you find that works. Give yourself enough time to study, visualize, your information, also write it down to help things stick a little bit more. And I think you guys are going to do just very well on your exam. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope these tips and tricks helped a little bit. Have a wonderful day, afternoon, evening, whatever it may be. If you need any help reviewing or critiquing your resume or essay or anything like that, please take a look at the description box down below and it'll tell you the process of how all that is done. Thank you guys again, and remember to always believe in yourself. All right, have a good one, guys. Bye.